And we're live. It's Topline 60.
Oh,
You're listening. It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
60.
I mean, that's 100 in Sam math, so we're there. We did it.
And it's 500 in AJ math.
Yes,
This is an
that's actually true.
This is an 8-figure podcast right here. Media property. You're listening to Topline. Sam Jacobs, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman. Do check out our YouTube channel so you can see AJ's warm, beautiful face.
Yeah.
He's just looking a little more statesman-like these days, folks. A little more statesman-like.
Lights, camera, action over here. It took me 45 minutes to set all of this up.
Really? Is that it?
No, actually, I'm getting pretty good at this, but the challenge is no one can open the door. Like if I hear my wife coming in the house, if she opens up the door, the whole thing just comes crashing down. So
And don't open the freaking door. And what are you doing? What are you doing?
The whole facade, Sam, my whole world just comes crashing down on top of me.
I saw the setup. It is a facade. It's a lot of ugly wires and
that's
boom.
the problem with these setups. Like whenever you see it on YouTube, you're like, what a stylish office. A person would love to like work here. And then you see the behind the scenes, you're like, I couldn't work in that. Like this is so
There's
messy.
wires everywhere.
Yeah, quit hating on my office right now. My studio
I'm
office.
loving on your office. The background's
beautiful.
good. You got like some kind of toys in the background, some planes, some airplane
He's got
stuff.
that dark in the dark color on the wall, which is supposed to be really important with these setups.
Is that true?
Yeah, they say you have to have dark and then a contrast and a warm light. He got it all. He got it all.
The
I look like
practicals.
I'm in like a beach prison cell.
I haven't figured out the practicals. That's what they call the background, is like the neon lights that glow on the wall.
Right.
And it's going to get there.
Lava lamp.
Yeah, lava lamp. That's what I need. Look, the world has gone backwards because we're wearing Jenko jeans and like pocket wallets again. Why do we not bring back lava lamps? That's what this podcast should really
Never
be.
liked
Going
lava
away in my
lamps.
world, brother.
Sam's got a collection. He actually collects lava lamps.
I
over
don't.
there.
What do I have? Nothing interesting. I have a lion. I have a big bronze lion.
Oh, I like lions. My name means lion.
Ah, there we go. I believe that. You are a lion, you beast.
There you go.
Stylish beast.
And we've gone off the rails already, folks.
And welcome to Topline, the podcast for the best founders, operators, and investors in B2B tech. Every week, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, will break down what's important for you to know to be the most well-informed professionals in the market.
This episode of the Pavilion Podcast is brought to you by AirCall, the business communications intelligence platform. With AirCall, you can bring your CRM and help desk together with your phone, chat, and messaging system to save time and resource on customer communications, admin, and reporting. To deliver an even better customer service, visit AirCall. That's AIRCALL.io.
How's everybody doing? Asad?
I am sick. I think I've been, life comes with trade-offs. And so I've been running at it for a couple of months and now I'm dealing with the trade-offs. So I need to take a minute and get my immunity back up. So I'm sick, but I'm also happy and things are great and life's good.
Are you drinking your AG1?
No, I saw a lot of research about the benefits of going deeper with certain vitamins rather than this broad like supplement. And so I've just bought a bunch of things and I'm trying to like figure out the science.
All right. Well, relay the science back
I'll
to
let
us.
you guys know.
For the listeners out there, we were on text and I was asking AJ, what is this diet? What is this nutrition, this fitness regimen? And I can't even repeat it. It's not, you may die. It's not good for you.
You wanted me to write, Sam, I think what you said is, AJ, you should write a book on this. Like, you need to write a book.
How I'm
2
not
pages.
dead. How I'm surprisingly not dead. By
That's even the
I
title
came
of the
into
book.
this chat like halfway through and the first thing I read is Sam saying, this sounds super unhealthy.
It's basically, is there milk in your lattes? What's the kind of milk?
Oh, I do a cream, all cream, whole milk only.
I'm not joking, dear listener, that most of AJ's diet is whole milk lattes. And I'm not joking. He's like, I do that and then I eat dinner and sometimes I don't eat dinner.
See, Sam, I'm just I'm a 6-year-old kid at heart. It makes the bones really strong. It's just you need your dairy, not milk. So here's what it is, dear listener. If you want to know, I do not eat breakfast or lunch. I've never really eaten breakfast, and my days are hectic, like all of us out there, and so I just kind of skip lunch. But I do have lattes. I make lattes in the morning. It's kind of my soothing, calming exercise. It takes me way too long to make a latte in the morning, probably 20 minutes.
What?
So there's a lot to it. If you're out there and you're like, what are you even talking about? I just want you to Google one term. It's called WDT plus espresso, and you will see exactly what I am talking about on why this takes a long time. It's basically a wire brush that you brush the grounds of the espresso very lightly. So let's get to
sexual.
Actually, now that I think about this book could be like 30 pages. Just 20 of it is me talking about making espresso. So I have 2 lattes during the day, and then I will eat dinner at night. My wife cooks a lovely meal. Sometimes we have dinner as a family. But on Mondays, my dinner is actually a 3rd latte. I didn't tell you that, Sam. Asad and I would talk when I was at Starbucks, and I would be having my 3rd latte. So, and then I do a Peloton HIIT workout in the morning with my wife, and I run 5 to 8 miles in the afternoon. And
by the way,
my
AJ math, that is up from 4 to 8 miles. Message, so by the end,
it's running now. It's not the brisk walk he was doing last year.
No. I have the fitness activity tracker.
How many miles have you run in May?
Oh, that's actually a great question. I actually would love to tell you that. I could tell you that right now. You go to trends and then history, and I have to go to running. Total runs for May 28. Distance 110.39 miles.
Ooh, you're 3 miles ahead of me, you bastard.
Yeah, what's your pace?
8:19.
8:30.
Oh,
right.
Oh, look at this.
That's not nothing.
Little mano a mano.
So if you want to join our Slack channel to see Sam and I just competitively, I can't bleep it, but talk each other, we can do that. We shall do that. So join our Slack channel. That's what I'm really saying today.
Today was a tour of the bottom of Manhattan at 8:23. 6:31 at 8:23.
Not bad.
It's okay. It's not great.
It's not nothing.
Let's start. How about that for banter, folks? You're out there. You're doing your workout. Kyle, you're doing your workout. Josh he's on the bike. He's in all spandex.
Josh is like heavy on the bike, man. Josh is.
I know. He's got his helmet on.
Beast.
He's just fully latex. Every part of his body is covered in latex. He's going to a dungeon after his bike ride.
Real quick question: is that just like the mental piece of it of wearing that kind of? Really,
like if you're a swimmer, you wax every part of your body because you're looking for every little bit of edge, right? So if you're completely hairless, you get a little bit more of an edge, and so if you wear that thing, it's lighter.
And Josh is competitive,
more aerodynamic. Too. Yeah. Josh is very competitive.
He's a competitive cyclist, so I get it.
Oh yeah, let's jump in.
All right. Banter over.
So banter over. So we
gained interest in your personal lives over. Go-to-market conversation.
We're going to talk about a couple of things today. We're going to talk about meetings. We're going to talk about loneliness, but we're going to start by talking about strategy. So Dave Kellogg published a great blog on strategy. It's called Play to Win versus Play to Make Plan. And he shared that strategy is a function of situation. And situations vary based on individual companies and time. A lot of the classic strategy books in the Valley were written at a different time and had a couple of implied assumptions. These implied assumptions were that we were early on, and so everything was a new category. There was a greenfield market ripe for the taking, and once you took it, switching costs were really high. Think about on-prem, so you could keep that market. A lot of our LTV assumptions, even now in SaaS, are based on this old school assumption, and that if you didn't take it, somebody else would. What would drive those assumptions were underlying facts about exits. You could go public as the first, second, or third company in a category. The rest would become zombies with very few options. If you have read Play Bigger, the book on category design by Christopher Lochhead, a lot of it is tied to this idea. But now things have changed. Software markets are not new or greenfield. You can be you can build a good business in what was considered a niche market. Switching costs are not that high anymore. It's not that they don't exist, but they're not as high as before. And there are more exit options available as well. So now winning can mean more than what it meant before. For some, it means changing the world by creating a new market and dominating it and delivering 100x or more return to early investors. Here, according to Dave, winning means winning the market. For others, it's selling the company in 4 to 6 years for 3 times what investors paid for it. Here, winning means making plan because trust me, he said, you can be sure that any board-approved plan will put you or keep you on track to deliver that 3x. Sam, have you noticed this shift during the course of your career? And do you see this new bifurcation being the steady state moving forward? And general thoughts on this?
I have noticed this shift. It's the theme that we've been talking about the entire time we've been doing this podcast. And it coincides with a rise in interest rates and a move from growth at any cost to profitable, efficient growth. And there's, as Dave points out, there are many factors that come into play, and even additional factors perhaps that he may not have mentioned. And I think perhaps, so one of the factors that he mentions is switching costs. And the reality is, particularly with SaaS, part of the beauty of SaaS, part of the point of it is that there are fewer switching costs. And I've said in the past on this show, a lot of the LTV assumptions that people model, and David Spitz has also articulated something similar, as has Ray Reich, I believe. But a lot of the LTV assumptions that people bake in to their businesses around 5-year customer lifetime, 7-year customer lifetime, all of function in some ways of very high gross retention at the beginning of their scale up period, are all illusory, are all mythical, and that actually people switch vendors all the time, and switching costs are extremely low. Think about the switching costs even between ChatGPT versus Claude versus Perplexity.
Nothing.
They're very little. The main switching cost is the ingrained neural pathway of your human habit.
Yeah.
And that's why there's no switching cost between Uber and Lyft, and yet somehow I'm only using Uber now. And I'm not even aware of what the meaningful price the price difference between Uber and Lyft would be. So first, that is a big factor that I think Dave is correct about. I also think that there's diversity of capital types. So that's also part of what he comments on, which is there's growth equity, there's private equity, there's seed stage investors, there's all kinds of different people that have, and there's even sovereign wealth funds, and in general, lots of liquidity, lots of capital available to be deployed at different price points and with different return expectations. And I'll tell you that I saw this very clearly. In fact, I don't think it comes as any surprise to anybody listening that if you think about what is the strategy of Pavilion, if you want to equate building a long-term, enduring, sustainable business, which we talked about last week, with playing to make plan, that's certainly the game that I've been in the whole time and I'm trying to be in. And when I raise money, we had a term sheet from Elephant Ventures, and I was encouraged to go shop that term sheet. So I went out to the biggest, Leaf Excel, who is at Tiger Global and had started Addition Capital. I was encouraged to meet with him because he apparently is a good guy, writes huge checks, was an investor in Peloton. That was a great thing at the time, probably less of a great thing today. And he said to me, if this business can't be worth $1 billion, it's really not that interesting to me. $500 million exit for you would be great, but for me, the fund dynamics just wouldn't make it work. And then I went back to my investors, Elephant Ventures, and I said, what do you think about that? And they said, 3x is fine with us. That's what we model. And because you already have some scale, and because we have a little bit of protection, we feel there's very little downside and meaningful upside. And if it gets better than 3x, that's great, but that's all we're modeling. So I think that availability of capital for different kinds of businesses is interesting. Mm-hmm. And then a factor that I think Dave did not mention, which is just relevant to what we've all been talking about, is the lowering costs of distribution through social media. And that means that going to market is both more competitive, but I guess I would say a little bit easier for companies with less capital. And what I mean by that is, we don't have a ton of capital available to us because of the way that we've structured the business, but I do have the ability to transmit a message to 90,000 LinkedIn followers on a regular basis. And I feel like that distribution access empowers solopreneurs, empowers smaller businesses. I talk about this company a little bit, Fixer AI, as one of the companies that's interesting in the AI space. But what's also interesting about what they're doing, they're engaging lots of LinkedIn influencers. They have no money. This is not they haven't even raised yet, but they've engaged, Colin Cadmus and me and Scott Leese and Kevin Dorsey. And so they're getting distribution pretty cost effectively. I don't know their unit economics, in a way that probably wasn't possible 5 years ago without a VP of marketing, without a content strategy, and without, a big investment in brand. And so I think that also is creating an opportunity for companies that you can call it, are playing to make plan. That doesn't mean that there aren't companies like OpenAI itself that aren't playing to win and win the entire category and be effectively the AI operating layer of, the modern economy. And I think some people are into that. It depends on your risk profile, but a lot of wellness, a lot of mental health, a lot of the work that we talk about doing on this podcast is about probably letting go of the need for that. To rationalize our identities and who we are as people. So where I come out on it, I think higher interest rates are creating an adjustment. I think I'm trying to build Pavilion to be profitable and sustainable and to create enterprise value over a 5 to 10 year period. And if something happens before then, that's fantastic. But I really like my job now. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat.
Well, Peloton is down 90% in the last 12 months.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But at the time, Leaf XL was like, a god among people that wrote massive, almost like a different version of Masa.
I use Lyft, by the way, not Uber, so I think it's actually funny. Yeah, I'm a big Lyft.
You just wait for like 25 minutes while somebody drives from like uptown to downtown to pick you up.
I think they're the same. You know what really frustrates me about this is where I don't know, if you both tell me and sell me on something right now, I will switch to Uber. Here's the issue I have is when I book a Lyft and then they're clearly finishing an Uber and they go further away and then come back. Does that happen in Uber at all?
It's the worst thing in the world, and you want to scream at the top of your lungs. Yeah. You feel like a total jerk because you're like, I'm yelling at this thing that didn't exist 10 years ago, but it's a horrible feeling.
It's a frustrating thing. Okay, well,
I think the thing I like about Uber the most is that if you start moving up into the different tiers, you can define whether or not they're going to converse with you. I like silence. I like the temperature predefined. I like the car to be a lot cleaner. Like, there are these things that you get. And at least wherever I've gone, it's the fastest when I think that matters.
Yeah. Corporate Bro was the first mover and shaker in the social media in terms of sponsorship for companies. I don't have any data on it. I know some of the companies that he's sponsored over the years. I'm just wondering if that's I would love to see the ROI and if there's actually a meaningful impact on some of the skits he's done with some of these sponsors.
AJ, do you think it's like a combination of what he can offer you is great distribution, right? But I've seen some of the companies that he's supported and they don't have great products. And so distribution is one part of the equation. You still have to have a compelling product to convert. And I think the more and more this takes off, you're going to find the match between a good distribution partner and a good product. And that's magical. But Corporate Bro, with all of his reach, cannot help a blah product do well.
Well, you just nailed it. Product distribution, those are the two things.
Exactly. Those literally are two important things. Correct.
And podcast. We did it, guys. We won. But I think, Asad, I have a question for you on this because switching costs is really interesting. There are absolutely inherent things that we are just not going to switch. In business, CRM is usually one of them. However, Asad, you did go through a CRM switch. And I'm curious as to how you weighed switching costs in that decision, and
Didn't
did
really
that
care.
actually?
It was seamless, to be honest. It's the third time we've done it in less than 10 years. It was really seamless, guys.
Salesforce was one of those CRMs at one time
Salesforce was
too.
one of them. And the last one we switched off of was Salesforce. And so our story with it was that Salesforce was the CRM. On top of it was built an ATS. We need these two things to run our business. And the ATS was a third-party company that built something really innovative, and then they got bought by Bullhorn, and they stopped innovating, so it just stayed still. And so I really liked Salesforce as a CRM. I actually think the CRM functionality in Salesforce was better than the one that we're on right now, but their ATS functionality is way better, like 100 times better, and that's more important for us. So an example is when I want to pull up a data point, I'll get the same data points, the same reporting's available. This one literally takes a minute to load. I can say load and go down and come up and it's still there, where Salesforce was a lot faster, but that's a trade-off we're willing to make. And it wasn't an anxiety-inducing shift, to be honest. It was actually way easier than we even thought.
We looked at switching CRMs this year, and the switching costs were not worth it. We were quoted $100,000 for just the solutions implementation to change from one to another. Yeah, it was just like, okay, it's not there yet, and I think that's the barrier to entry on some of the switching costs. We're not going to switch cloud providers. I know Kubernetes and other containerized things make it easier to do, but I don't think anyone's switching on a product company.
I think the point though is that switching costs on the on-premise world were way higher and are now comparatively lower, right? So, and depending on the size of your business and a few other elements, it might not be as big of a consideration as it was before. The other thing that I think he didn't highlight that's really interesting is that in the average deal size for the same product on-prem versus cloud is very different. Cloud enabled SaaS, right? So, which brought down the deal size from, let's say, 100,000 to like 10,000 a year. And the decision maker went from $100,000 decision for a business like mine is my decision. A $10,000 decision, I might have an opinion on it, but it doesn't have to be my decision. The due diligence I have to do is less, so the sales cycle gets reduced. The type of salespeople you can hire is very different, which is why in the world of SaaS, the average age of a sales team went down quite significantly. So I think prices are just lower than they were before, and hence one of the prices, switching costs, is also lower.
Well, Asad, what do you think? Do you think that this is long-term? I mean, we talk about this in some way, shape, or form almost every week because we're talking about it relative to interest rates, but do you think this is a secular shift? Do you think it's foolish for entrepreneurs to try and win the market? I mean, there's something, there's a conversation that happens, at least in New York, about among investors who believe that if Mark Zuckerberg was based in New York City or Boston, he would have sold Facebook to Yahoo or would have gotten out of the business way earlier. And there's something about the air in California, the drugs. I'm not even kidding, actually. Just there's an openness to the mindset and there's an ambition, maybe almost coupled with less of a need specifically for money, but more of a need to accomplish big things. And so there's a point of view that bigger exits happen in Silicon Valley because there's more people that are shooting for the moon. And on New York, everybody sells on the way up. Do you think that that's true? Do you think, I guess, what's your take on this, on Dave's point?
I think that part is true. And you can see a spectrum of New York would be in the middle, California on one end of the spectrum, which I think enables bigger thinking and gives people more confidence to run for the big prize. Toronto is on the other side of that spectrum where we sell really easily. Like there's a lot of $50-60 million sales that happen in Canada. There are very few Shopifys that get built over here. They're not existent, but we are a very conservative society. When it comes to building businesses, we're very risk averse in terms of how we deploy capital into these organizations and how quickly we're willing to say yes to an offer. So I do think there's some differences between where you build, and those are environmental, cultural differences that I think come into play. I think this shift that he's talking about, the big part of the shift, I think, is actually the cloud enabling the ability for more businesses to exist than they could exist before. There's a reason why venture capital used to be called adventure capital back in the day. It was just really hard to build these businesses and fund them. There was no recurring revenue. It was a lot of hardware. It required a lot of investment. Your sales teams, you had to hire people that could sell these big deals. And it was just so risky. And the cloud basically changed all of that. So I think it enabled a subset of companies to exist that couldn't exist before. And then along the way, you start seeing the ecosystem come together. And as you said, now you have capital available more so than before to enable these type of organizations. The one nuance there is that I still think there isn't enough starting capital. So I think everybody has to start with the big vision to get the first million of seed funding, and then you can adjust. But it's hard. I find it really difficult for people to get that first $1 million of capital to build a play to make plan type of company. But I do think this trend sustains itself over the long term. And you might even see, like as Mark Robert said on the pod, there's a certain ACV that you just couldn't build a business around. AI will enable that. So I think maybe just as technology evolves, this becomes more pronounced, which is kind of cool.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're stating the obvious. I think you have, right? Shopify we mentioned, but you also have Spotify, HubSpot, Toast, Sprinkler, Better.com, Data.com. Datadog, Drift, Calendly. These are just Peloton, of course, the great company Peloton. I think there's clearly something here to be said about this on the capital. We've talked about this previously. Brian Halligan made a really good point. I want to talk last,
Brian
which was
Halligan. Love Brian Halligan.
He has really good anecdotes for some of these things. One of them was
a great life he leads. Just very
I will just use someone nameless came up with this great anecdote one time that said that everyone from New England is like pilgrims. They have belt buckles, belts on their pants. They have belt buckles on their hats. Everything is like really buttoned up. And I think that's really good way to think about like the East Coast versus the West Coast, where the West Coast is much freer and takes risks on these things. So yeah, of course that at the end of the day, there's going to be some data that shows they're selling on the way up, but there's plenty of companies that have done well in the East Coast. So
the percentages are just different. It's undeniable that if there is something to say about Silicon Valley and just California in general, especially Silicon Valley, the concentration there is wild. Like you have companies like NVIDIA that in a week increase their market cap by the equivalent value of Amazon. There's something special about that place. It's undeniable. But what's not undeniable is you can build a great company in other markets. You can do that as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the question that you had asked in the docket, Asad, for me was just around like when you go to fundraise, how big of a picture do you have to paint from a fundraising standpoint? And I had a really great call with my previous co-founder when I was raising the Series B, and I was feeling a little down. I had competitors on the West Coast that had just raised large Series B, and it felt like we were behind. And he was like, AJ, you know this story. Come on, you can go paint. You're one of the best sellers I've ever met. You can go paint a really good picture, and you have a really big picture. Go bigger. And I did.
That's the thing.
And that did change my fundraise. But it wasn't, I wanted to make sure I was being authentic and telling a narrative that I could still see us growing into. It just maybe getting caught up in it and selling a vision that was 5 to 10 years versus 2 to 3 years. And I think that that's one thing that we've talked about and how we build great businesses is that we still have that we've been thinking about our businesses in much more of a long-term vision of 5 to 10 years. That's what we pitched during the fundraise. So that hasn't changed. And that's the actual great thing about this is that those two things have matched a little bit better and allowed us to set expectations differently. At least I have set expectations differently this year as compared to last year.
Do you think that you're in a unique situation where you raised a lot of money when the market was hot and you had the wherewithal to be able to get your board to not force you to spend it, and be calm and composed about how you guys allocate capital. I think that's an advanced level of being able to do this, right? A lot of people, when they raise a lot of money, just
or it's called luck, Asad. But yeah, sure.
right? But like you didn't lose your mind and just go and spend everything, which a lot of people did, right? A lot of people did that.
Yeah.
The challenge with this, I think, is as this split of two types of companies being able to exist and both being viable, I think is a good thing. I think you want more of this in the world. But what hasn't happened yet is investors who have raised funds to enable these play to make plan companies at enough of a scale. They are the elephant ventures of the world, but there are not a lot of starting capital investors out there. And even the elephants, they're few and far between. And other types of investors, venture capitalists, their fund dynamics don't enable them sometimes to go early in these type of businesses, because by the time they get diluted, it's just not enough for what they have to return, right, over the next 10 to 16 years to their investors. So I think that part of the ecosystem has to develop, because right now what you have are people that in their heart are trying to build a 3x business, but keep having to sell these 100x visions. And that's not ideal.
I think I shared this story already, but I just want to underscore the point that you just made, Asad. That is the fundamental tension. Is not, are both things possible? The fundamental tension is the pressure that people feel to do what AJ did.
Yeah,
and even it's to sell a much bigger idea to get the money, and then you go back to do the business.
Yeah.
And the proof points you're getting are around the make plan business, not the world changing category creation business. And what do you do then? And I told the story of a person, that's in Pavilion, that has a business where the services part of the business is great. It's a great business. And the software part of this business is much more speculative. And they raised money from venture investors that said, if you're not going to build the software, give us our money back. And I mentioned that, my advice was, I don't really think you're obligated to give the money back.
Yeah,
but maybe you do some kind of promise if you feel really bad about it. But I think it's really hard because you as the non-diversified owner of the business, you're obligated to follow the tea leaves of the business. That's what Mark said, right? Well, remember what Mark said. Forget what episode it was. Maybe it was 57, 56. Go back and figure it out, listener. But
it was 98, actually. I think it was episode 98.
He said the organic tea leaves. That's what he said. The phrase that he used was the organic tea leaves. And what his point was that if the business is telling you, meaning you're getting inbound leads, there's positive word of mouth, there's high NPS, people are renewing. If the organic tea leaves of the business are telling you that you should go big, then you should go big.
Yeah.
And the question is, how much does vision play a part? How much does goal setting play a part? And are you, and how, and what is truly inside you? Because for me, I don't know if I'm worried, but I'll say I'm worried. I don't want to bet the company on going super big. And I also think that community, we just looked at churn and retention, and it tracks pretty closely to new member acquisition. Like the bigger a community gets, the more churn increases. And that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But the point is, if I try to supercharge growth, I'll lose even more of what made Pavilion special at the very beginning. And I don't really have any aspiration. I don't need to be worth $1 billion, and I don't need to have 1 million members to feel like this was a huge success. I feel like in many ways it already has been a huge success. So for me to try and push towards the win the market idea, it would feel inauthentic to me. And I don't know what that, I think that's true for a meaningful number of people. And I think if you read about mental health, that's true for a lot of people. It wouldn't feel good for Elon Musk. He needs to win the market. He needs to be the biggest person in the world. But there's lots of people that don't.
Yeah. We, the three of us have mutual friends that have raised, and one of the challenges that they came up with was they had someone on their executive team that they didn't believe in, didn't think was the right fit any longer, but were challenged with this raise that they were just had and telling the board that this person was no longer a right fit for the organization. Their narrative had changed.
Isn't that
And that's
interesting?
It's a really frustrating
No, but like
spot.
the fascinating thing about what you just, I totally forgot this story. It was that when you're raising, you're like, look at my team. I have this gangster team, like AAA. These are the best of the best. And then like a month later, you're like, well, this one is a problem, and that one's that's really tricky.
So there's this natural tension of like, what do you communicate to the board in a way that makes the most sense? And we were all sitting there when we had these conversations, like you got to like, let's say rip the Band-Aid off, because it's actually not that big of a deal, honestly. But you're building up, because you've built this story of who this person is, you're making it a big issue, when at the end of the day, it's not that big of an issue. It truly isn't. If you just like walk through and like write down like, hey, writing a board memo of saying like, this is the decision, I'm flagging this thing, here are the steps that I'm going through, I just want to be very clear, brings you a lot of respect at that board level. No matter what, you could actually even do that before you raise, and you'll still gain that respect. But it's a really difficult thing to do when you're being told to paint this massive picture.
Because you have to pick and choose like how many holes are you showing, right? Like not everybody has a perfect like story to tell. So you're like, oh my God, like if everybody is like completely open the kimono, then nobody raises, like a lot of them don't end up raising, and there's flaws in all of that. You know what we should do? We should start a Topline fund, and we should fund these 3X businesses. That would be fantastic. I would love to do
I had this idea. This is not on the docket.
Dun, dun, dun.
Perhaps a word from our sponsor.
Hi there, I'm Andre Bresso, go-to-market leader and chapter head of the Pavilion community in Amsterdam, and a big fan of Topline. If you're a CRO or sales executive, listen up, because this is something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for June 6th and head over to Boston for the Pavilion CRO Summit. You get to hear from top-notch practitioners like Mark Roberge from Stage 2 Capital, Heis Davis at Gradient Works, and Aaron Bates of Crossbeam. They are diving into the essential topics every go-to-market executive needs to dominate in 2024. Register now at joinpavilion.com/CRO Summit and use the code TOPLINE to receive 20% off your ticket. Enjoy.
I have a question. Let's talk about this. Can we talk about this for a second?
Yeah.
You're raising.
Yeah.
You want to raise. You're running out of money at some point, say 9 months. You have an executive team. You feel there's one or two people that you don't think are going to make it much longer. In fact, if you had infinite funds, you would have fired them already.
Yeah.
But that's not where you are. AJ, what do you think? Do you think you fire them before you raise and you say, this is the team? Do you raise with the team, not fire them because that would be too disruptive, and then fire them after and say, listen, it doesn't work out, knowing, because I agree with you, AJ, investors, they care a little bit, I think, but everybody knows that teams turn over with great frequency and that it happens, especially on the go-to-market side. So do you wait and try to close the round and then make a decision if you know that the person's not a good fit? Do you make the decision beforehand and then you raise knowing that whatever the state of your business is, that's what the state of it is, and you're not going to change it that much? What do you think?
I'm staring at a quote, Sam, right now. I'm not even kidding. It's on this productivity book that I have. If you're looking at YouTube, I have it right here. And it's every day there's a different one. I just saw this. It says, deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. Steve Jobs. And the point there being is that when you're in these indecisive moments and you're kind of like waiting it out, or maybe it will get better, or I'll work with this person, you're making a decision by doing that. And I put the running out of money aside, because I actually think that that's irrelevant to the decision that you're trying to make here, which is this the person to 10x my business and make that decision? And we've all been there, and we have these conversations with our CEO coach. I'm sure you have. I've had one recently in this realm last year, and went through and said, AJ, you've brought up this person every single conversation. You already know what to do. You already know what you need to do as a CEO, as a decision maker. Sometimes there's other stresses in the business that cloud our judgment, like running out of money, like pressures from home, like feeling lonely, and those cloud our judgment. But when we're in clear thought and we know what we need to do, you need to go make that decision and make that change. It's easier said than done on my sitting right here, but I think that allowing that person in the business who's not going to be a part of the story no matter what you do at the next stage, whatever that next stage looks like, then what's the point? What are they really providing for the business?
The tough thing is that usually it's not like we're talking about a C or a D grade employee, right? It's more like a B minus.
Are we? Yeah, well, the B minuses are usually the
tough.
worst.
Like those.
I read a really great article that was like the competent manager is the worst executive.
Oh yeah.
And it was really about these B players that they're like under the radar. They don't cause trouble. They're not disruptive. They're not conflictive. They don't spur debate, discussion, strategy. And that is the worst executive you can have on your team.
If you have a lot of them, you get a culture. It materializes where your culture has a lot of blame minimization and how decisions are made. And blame minimization is just so damaging to your ability to do great things in the world, build a great product, and take thoughtful bets, make thoughtful bets. It's really hard to even do that. So it's hard. I think, Sam, to your question, if you are going to raise, and our friend was not in the best position to go and raise, right? Like this wasn't an easy round to raise. And so I think you just have to look at it case by case and say, do I have a winning story here with all of these issues? Like, what's my narrative? What's my story? It's like, okay, my unit economics are not A+. My burn rate is this. My runway is Y. My team is like, maybe that story doesn't get you to the round. And sometimes you don't have to lie, but you have to pick what problems you are highlighting. Maybe you don't highlight that person as a AAA talent. Like, don't do that. You're going to get into trouble with that. But maybe you don't say, with this money, I'm going to correct this entire team. And you focus on some of the other problems and you bring this up later. I think that's okay. Like, that's not a lie. That's more like omission. I'm okay with omission sometimes.
Sam, what was your advice to this person?
My advice is do whatever is right for the business in whatever period is right for the business, which is probably part ways with them sooner rather than later, because I think that investors are way more used to lots of turnover than we think that they are.
Yeah,
and I don't think that they think that, I mean, it depends. If it's a technical co-founder and it's a software business, yeah, that's a big deal. But candidly, most people think that. I don't think this, listeners. I don't think this. I'm just saying some people say that go-to-market executives are more interchangeable than technical executives. And so on the go-to-market side, I don't think you're losing anything by saying, yeah, it didn't work out with that VP of sales. Oh, we like that person. We met them during due diligence. Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work out. Okay, no problem. Who's next?
Why are the perceived switching costs a lot lower for go-to-market versus technical?
Institutional knowledge. I mean, technical knows where all the bodies are buried, I would say, but the go-to-market frameworks are typically thought of as timeless, I would think. I don't know. Sam might have a different answer to that, but that's what I've seen.
The code base has a lot of like pretty solidified choices that were made by the
single point of failure.
Yeah, just like we chose to build it in this, and that, in these languages, using this database on this cloud provider. So, yeah, like if you want to get rid of me, then we're going to have to rebuild the whole code base in whatever the languages are that the new executive wants to build in, unless he or she happens to exactly have made my choices.
Yeah, that's tricky.
That's tricky. Fine. I'll do it myself. I'll work weekends. I can figure it out.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about hiring when it comes to these type of businesses. Do you think that if we know what the bet is when a person is joining a startup that's supposed to be the next, Meta or whatever, right? Like, it's like, okay, this is a very risky bet, but if this works out, this can be life-changing for me. right? If you joined even NVIDIA 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, right now, you're just laughing. Like, it's such a good bet, 10 years ago.
You are really laughing.
You're really laughing. Like,
You're laughing.
Even
You're
4, 5
happy.
years ago, by
You're
the
so
way.
happy.
If you got
You're
a $400,000 grant, let's say 6, 7, 8 years ago, like you're sitting on like 10 million plus, and that's not a high level like executive. That's just like manager.
You're just happy. You're a happy person.
Yeah.
It'll fade. It'll fade. But right now, you're just like, this is great.
This is fantastic. And so a lot of people, when they're joining a company that is at the earliest stage of its life cycle and trying to take off, that's the bet they're making. That same type of upside is not available if you are playing to make plan. So is there a difference in the caliber of talent you can attract? Is that a difference, Sam, that you think that founders have to get their heads around, that the very best will go to those other companies?
Yeah. I think the answer is yeah. I think
that's the trade-off. A little bit.
Playing to make plan means playing for efficiency, which means you can't throw money around. If the very very best people that don't want to start their own company will ultimately, I know this isn't universally true, but it's hard to repeat a scalable process of we are going to pay less than the top. So the person already doesn't want to start a company. So they're not so risk seeking that they're willing to take this biggest chance. So okay, so then they're cross referencing. I want to be head of sales for one of the new categories emerging at this company, Invisible, which provides a lot of like the base layer training programs for OpenAI and a bunch of other companies, and is racing past 100 million. So I could do that. And or I could go work for a Series A or just an earlier stage, a $5 to $10 million business that's growing about 30%. And, it'll be worth something, but Invisible is going to pay me full freight market.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get equity, and it might be a unicorn. And if it's not a unicorn or worth a couple $billion, I'm still going to make market rate on my comp. I think that's a really hard. It's not impossible. It doesn't mean that, but I definitely think that fundamentally, if you're going to pay less than the top and you're not going to be one of the high flyers, you're probably going to be working from a different pool of talent. But you, Asad, are the recruiter on the call. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think you nailed it. It's just really hard. Like, I think trade-off. Everything in life is trade-offs. And so if you're building a business like this, you can hire some very, very great people. But there will be a subset of people that have gotten to the point where they are going to have offers from those very best companies that are taking off or can take off. And if they are in that position where a tier one opportunity is on the table against yours, you will most likely lose. What I do believe is that these organizations, profitable, efficient, growth-focused organizations, are better training grounds. Because when you learn how to do things efficiently, you can then very easily adjust to like, let me be a little bit risky and bolder. So I think it's a nice place to learn because you have constraints. They say that companies that are started in downturns, some of the greatest companies ever are started in downturns. Part of that is they had to figure out early product market fit with heavy constraints, and that's good. So I think you can get a lot of people that are on the upward trajectory in their careers that are uber talented, maybe not as experienced, and they're going to spend a bunch of years with you, and then they'll move on to the next opportunity, and they'll use this as a place to train themselves to be able to unlock those opportunities. I think that is a good type of hire to focus in on if you're a business like that, and we're a business like that, and those are the types of people that we focus in on. Some of them spend their lives with us, but we're okay with some moving on. They do a good stint and then they move on. Okay, so I want to talk about loneliness before we wrap this one up. So our companies, we operate because of the people in them doing tasks in service of our strategic goals. We sell to other people. And so looking at how people are doing is important because it informs our internal and external commercial strategies to some extent. In episode 57, we spoke about Scott Galloway's TED Talk, which was on how the younger generation is really disadvantaged compared to previous generations. So we spoke about that cohort. Today, we're going to talk about loneliness in the workspace. And there's some data that I came across that I think is fascinating, and I'm very curious to get your takes on it. So more than 40% of fully remote workers polled in a 2023 survey of working parents said they go days without leaving the house. 5 years ago, 79% of people that felt that they knew their coworker on a personal level. That's dropped down to 68% now. The number of adults who call themselves lonely has climbed to 58%. It was 46% in 2018. And 40% of people who identify themselves as lonely spend more than 50% of their time in meetings. The result is staff turnover, worker absences, and also the quality of work diminishes when you're lonely and sad and not feeling great. Cigna, a health insurance provider, believes that loneliness is costing companies $154 billion a year in just absenteeism alone. Sam, why should organizations care about this? Is this an organization's problem, or is this one of the after effects of the pandemic and has many different root causes, and this is not something we as organizations and employers need to worry about? Or do you think we have a role to play here? Like, what are your thoughts on when you hear this?
I think we have a role to play because of this 154 billion number and because of the lost productivity of unengaged workers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, but I also think it's a human race issue and challenge. And I think it's just really, I mean, honestly, I talk about this a lot, but it used to be very commonplace. Like you'd wake up earlier.
Yeah.
I'd wake up earlier.
Yeah.
And I'd be in the office by 8:30, latest 9, but 9 felt late. So I'd be in the office by 8:30 and I'd be there till 6:37, and leaving at 6:30 felt early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was what life was like. And I didn't have, maybe I had an IBM ThinkPad, I don't know, but like my life was not lived on my laptop. It was lived on my BlackBerry and at work. And it's just not what it's like anymore. And most companies there's very few companies that have people back in the office 5 days a week. And then, so that's at the same time that what happens is these habits that you form become comfortable, and discomfort becomes breaking the habit of being out amongst people. And yet humans are social creatures, and we value our alone time. I certainly do, but I also deeply value group time.
Yeah.
I deeply value that sense of, and not just one-on-one, because I think that, there's different forms of loneliness, and it's not just one other person. It's, for me, where do I get energy? I get energy on my own. I get energy in one-on-one interactions that are really fun. And then I get energy in larger, medium-sized group interactions of people that I know and love. Like this guys' weekend that I do every year with like 8, 9, 10 of my best friends. And I love bouncing around and talking to people. And so where does that leave us? Well, you used to get some of those group interactions at work. You go out for beers after work. Honestly, the after work drinks that Axial would do were epic. And lots of illegal things happened and lots of things that I wasn't privy to. But nevertheless, the bonds that those people formed that work for me were so freaking strong, and they loved their jobs. And Axial was not a particularly successful company, but people loved working there.
Yeah.
And people were happy. People were happy to work till 7 p.m., 8 p.m., not as happy to work till 9 p.m., but they were happy to put in 10, 11, 12-hour days. And I don't think it's like everybody's gotten lazier. I just think that the stuff that holds us together is much weaker, and there aren't structures for bringing us together. So yeah, I think it's important. I think it's an organizational issue because it saps productivity. And I think it's a human race issue because I don't know that. I think sometimes people think they're supposed to live like this, but I don't know that they actually are. We used to live in villages. The whole idea, by the way, no, this is a tangent, but the idea that like a couple, a man and a woman, or whatever the couple, man and a man, doesn't matter. Two people alone, were supposed to raise a child. That is a creation of modern society. That is not
it was unheard of before.
Unheard of. The village. Yeah. That's why Hillary called that book "It Takes a Village." Like, it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have help.
Yeah.
You're supposed to share in the burden. Like, it's the grandparents living together. 100%. Like, we come from groups of people. We don't just come from one-on-one interactions. So yeah, I think it's a big deal.
AJ, what are you thinking? As Sam is talking, it's so clear that companionship of different sorts is absolutely critical. We've grown up that way. Like, if you distill it down, I think humans are just bacteria that takes itself really seriously, and this is what we've created because of it. But now we're here, and we're used to companionship, and we need it. And people are going days without leaving the house. What do you think? Have you done anything in your organization that's moving the needle in this area?
Well, when Sam was talking, it reminded me of the movie Interstellar, when they're like talking about the blight. There's the museum, and it's like all the dust. You both have seen Interstellar. Please tell me.
I have.
Okay. But like they have a museum. They're like, yeah, there was dust everywhere, and just we couldn't, and the light was like this. So I was imagining Sam being like, and back in our day, this is what it looked like. But he's right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And you're both right. This is a human race issue, and it's a really big issue. I guess my question to you both: do you think an entrepreneur or founder or tech even could solve this?
Yes. So
you do.
We are 10 days away from implementing Rome. And so
by the way, so this is what Net Promoter Score is. Yeah. If you want to know, Rome didn't pay us. No. Howard didn't pay us. Yeah. Every other thing I've said, someone paid me to say.
Even Hillary for the book recommendation.
Hillary gave me one Ethereum and one Solana. Mentioned It Takes a Village. I'm just kidding. Anyway, keep going.
Well, if you go to Asad's LinkedIn, you can see plastered on it. It says Rome, like right across.
Come Rome with me. Okay, so I came across this technology. I'll tell you my thinking around this. I was talking to a couple of people that are on leaner teams. I like small teams. I don't like big teams. I like teams of 3, 4, 5. I think they're more productive. And so I was talking to some people, and they're like, man, I go days without talking to, or sometimes a whole week, and I've only spoken to like one coworker and my manager internally. It's a bit lonely. And I started thinking, I was like, okay, so when you're in an office, what are the trade-offs? What are the pros and cons? And the pros are learning by osmosis, serendipitous conversations, more connectivity. The trade-offs are it can get political, it can get toxic. Those are trade-offs, right? One of the pros is also you have a little bit more visibility to cross-functional teams, and so you can learn more than just your job, which, your business acumen grows, all of that. When you're remote, what are the trade-offs? Well, you have a lot more flexibility. You save time on commutes, but it's much lonelier. It's less political. It's less toxic, but it's lonelier. And so when I saw the Roam technology, which is essentially a virtual office, not like a virtual reality office, like an actual, like a web interface where all of us have these little avatars and we're sitting in our own offices and we have boardrooms and theaters and meetings rooms for clients. And I saw it and I asked them for a demo. They just released it to the public. And I've been talking about how if you want competitive advantages, you have to be early adopters for technology. So I saw it, I think the day they released it to the public, I asked for a demo. And the CMO invited me to their office for the demo. And I saw like 70, 80 people in that office just doing their thing. And it was the closest thing to visiting somebody's office that I felt online. There was energy there. And that energy was contagious. Like I was like, this is cool. This is exciting. And it's early days. It's only going to get better. And so we immediately did a proper demo for some other people in the company. And we, within 2 weeks, have gone into designing our office, and it'll be launched. It's really easy, right? It's there's no long-term contract. It's quite cheap. We're going to invite candidates and clients in there. So we interview probably 50 to 100 candidates a day. imagine all of them in a virtual office, and now you have a client meeting, you're pitching somebody and they come to your virtual office, they see all this energy over there. It's brilliant. Like, I think it can give you a little bit of what you're missing. You can have serendipitous conversation. I can go and knock on AJ's door and have a quick 5-minute conversation. I can have a lunch room where if everybody's having lunch, go have lunch together. I can have, like, there are things that it gives you back. It's not as good as being in an office, but it is way better than being on Slack and Zoom, which I hate.
Well, this portal went so well between New York and Ireland a few weeks ago. That
wasn't everybody taking off their pants? I got arrested actually.
Yeah, they had to close it down. But Asad, to be fair, you did just invest in an office, and a real office too.
I've
right?
had an office throughout. Like, I just changed the office. They gave me a much larger, much nicer office for 70 grand less. I don't know why. So I took it. Yeah. It's down the street.
Well, yeah.
But I'm on the last year of my lease. So I'd signed a 5-year extension the month before the pandemic for twice the rent. That's been a weight on my foot. We'll have smaller offices that are shared offices for people to go in and out of. But we're a remote company, and 2024 onwards, we're going to try to do remote better than anyone else. And I think to do that, you have to try technology. Like, that's the only unlock. It's like there's so much you can do in terms of meeting people and doing offsites and all of that, but those are still blips in the year. You need something that more consistently creates connectivity amongst people. And I think you solve loneliness by feeling more connected to people. So I hope that this helps. It also creates discipline when everybody's online. Hey, you logged on at 10 and then were off at 2 and then came back on for an hour at 4:30. Like, now we all have visibility to each other. So there's going to be a little bit more discipline, which I like.
The real truth comes out at the end. Here we go. Shout outs, wins of the week.
Indeed, shout outs and wins of the week. This segment brought to you by Wrigley's Chewing Gum. Juicy fruit.
That's NPS score, folks. That's real NPS score.
Kim's Dry Cleaners on the corner of Spring Street and Greenwich Street. Not Greenwich Ave, Greenwich Street.
I'll kick us off. I got 2 shout outs. One goes to Asad and his team for hosting Andy and Moise on our product team. Lydia was so gracious and nice enough to come in, and they worked out of STA's office last week, which was awesome. Thank you, Asad. And my second shout out goes to Ryan Reynolds for cashing in his check for If. It was not a good movie, so don't go see If.
Didn't John Krasinski write and direct it?
Yeah, John Krasinski, which he was also awful in. By the way, I'm just tearing these actors apart. He was in a hospital, like getting some sort of surgery, heart surgery. They didn't tell you, but he was in like a cardigan the whole time. It was very bizarre. I will say that it made me miss Robin Williams. I was like, Robin Williams. I was thinking the whole time, Robin Williams would have been great as Ryan Reynolds' character, but alas. So, there we go. Those are my shout outs.
I like it.
Good. Those are good.
I'll go next. Just 2 podcasts. Both Jason Lumpkin, one on 20 VC and the other with Dave Gerhardt, if you say his name correctly. The 20 VC one is around his biggest lessons from his 3 biggest wins and 3 biggest losses as an investor. It's fascinating. Like, one of them was...
Can I say one thing, though? I saw Harry Stubbings tweet that the SalesLoft acquisition was $20 billion. That's just not true.
Yeah, that's not true.
That's very weird.
$1 billion, I think.
No?
Or 2? 1 or 2?
It was not 20. He said that
might have added a zero in there.
$100 million on that. I'm like, no, he did not.
No, it wasn't that. But he shared one thing that I thought was really interesting. He's like, I liquidate my holding in a company the minute the founder steps down. And it's obviously not as clean cut as he makes it out to be, but it's really interesting to get their perspectives like this. The other one was with Dave Gerhardt, and that was very marketing focused. And I found what he shared about his content creation process, like Lumpkin as a creator, was fascinating. Like, he's like,
sure.
So he's like, he never writes a post, and like, he's like, more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes I don't spend on a post. He's like, I used to. Now it's like, he's like, one of my superpowers is it's written in my head by the time I come to the paper. I just slap it onto the paper and I walk away. I'm not perfecting grammar. I'm not perfecting these things, but I have it in my head and I can put it out there. He's already got his morning post written all the way into 2025. And then the afternoon posts he writes kind of on the go. So you can see like a different type of vibe over there. I found that really interesting. He has a very sharp point of view on the CMO to CRO transition. He doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
Again, great, like just great to listen to. So those are my 2 shout outs. Worth listening.
Dave Gerhardt was the only Patreon I've ever paid for. In 2020, he had a fantastic Patreon where he would share all these secrets. Yeah, it was very good.
It's my turn.
Yeah.
What content do I have for you today? I'm reading the book. There's a book that AJ mentioned casually called Working Backwards, Insight Stories and Secrets from Inside Amazon by Bill Carr and Colin Breyer. That book is fantastic. It's super, super tactical. You walk away just amazed at the volume of activities and decisions that Jeff Bezos was involved in. And there's a lot that you can't do, but there's a lot that you can do. And it helps me. It stimulated a lot of my thinking about how to build and run Pavilion. So that's great. And I also want to thank Guy Rubin from Ebsta for renewing his team's agreement and for deciding to come to the CRO Summit with his beautiful wife, Dev Rubin. Thank you. You are no longer on our accounts receivable list. You are in the black.
Dev is awesome, but also this NPS score was paid for. So,
And I guess I'll give a shout out to the community team at Pavilion as well. To the point of NPS, the executive NPS on a trailing 90-day basis at Pavilion is 40, which is a 2-year high. Last time it was this high was May of 2022.
I love that.
In a different economic environment.
Look at that. Look at that.
Thank you for listening to Topline, everybody. We've got, I think it should have come out on Friday, but if it didn't, we got the newsletter. Asad's the new editor-in-chief of the newsletter. We're going to be highlighting things from the Topline Slack channel. It's Sunday or Monday or Tuesday when you're listening to this, which means I'll be in Santa Cruz. But on Thursday, we're doing CRO Summit in Boston. AJ and Asad will be there. It's going to be great. Mark Roberge will be there. Another shout out, Seamus Ruiz Earl will be there, who announced this week that he sold his company Carabiner Group to Sales Benchmark Index, SBI. So it's going to be fantastic. And it's a case study for Pavilion. He talks about how Pavilion was indispensable in building Carabiner to the point that it was acquired by SBI. And I will agree with him.
I love that.
Thank you for listening to episode 60. This was a great one, folks. Thank you to the lighting in AJ's office. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're also taking a massive step up in this. So if you have feedback, we are listening.
We're listening.
Please join our Slack channel, and we will take all the feedback. We want to make the show as great as possible.
Indeed.
Go read my editorial. I spent a lot of time on it. I want
to
get
all about product market fit. He's really trying to make CSMPMF an acronym that people will use.
Yeah. I'm trying. I told Sam, I'm in the field. I'm trying things.
He's out. He's in the arena. This is what it's like. Some people build rocket ships, and he tries to invent stupid acronyms. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. This episode was brought to you by AirCall, the business communications intelligence platform. Deliver a better experience for your customers and your teams at AirCall. That's AIRCALL.io. Save time, save money, and improve performance with a single communications platform.
Thanks for listening to Topline. New episodes come out every Sunday. If you like what you heard today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to join our Topline Slack channel to connect with us and discuss the topics we cover with other listeners. Click the link in the show notes. Lastly, if you're interested in joining Pavilion, you can learn more about membership at joinpavilion.com/membership. Thanks again for listening.